Hey everyone, it's Mark Hode from the Absolute Business Mindset podcast and YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have Chris Joyce, who's the founder and CEO of Gasha, which is a performance-based equity tool. We're going to talk about his upbringing. We're going to talk about how he started 24 companies, and we're going to talk about how he sold businesses. And so we then go deep into Gasha and how that really is impacting a lot of people. And it's an incredible business that he's got there. We talk about mental health. We talk about starting startups, how to bootstrap, labs, incubators. There's so much that we talk about in this interview. So hopefully you enjoy it. Please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do hit a subscribe to the button. You'll get all of the notifications, hit the bell icon. Please do leave any comments down below, any questions that you've got about Chris or anyone that you would like me to interview on this podcast. So hopefully you're enjoying this content, and please do watch the video and enjoy your day. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Today we have Chris Joyce, who is the founder and CEO of Gasha, which is a performance-based equity business. Hello, Chris. How are you today?
I'm doing phenomenal, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to talk about your business. We're going to talk about how you run it and give some value to my audience about intertwined into your business. But the podcast is called Absolute Business Mindset. The first question to all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
A business mindset means to me primarily, I guess you could say, two things. One is flexibility to really listen to the markets, but at the same time, being extremely rigid with your purpose and your focus. I don't believe in making decisions twice. So you get into business, you are there primarily to achieve that end. You may have to be flexible about it, but you have absolute discipline, absolute focus when it comes to attaining that end.
And for you, we're going to jump straight into Gasha. What is the end game? What's the end game for you, Chris?
Sure. The end game for me is, and I've started a lot of businesses over my lifetime. As of right now, the end game for me in a simplistic statement is untapping as much human potential as possible. And I do that through my businesses. The one thing that I've seen from doing that is it has a ripple effect. When you get older, it's maybe more about the other people versus me. At the beginning of my career, it really was fundamentally centered around me. But as I've gotten older, it's more about having that ripple effect across the board. And I think that what I'm doing currently has the greatest ripple effect possibility.
Amazing. And it's incredible that you've started 24 businesses. This is what the notes when I was doing research on you.
Sure.
We will come to that soon, I promise. But another question I'm asking is, tell me one thing about your upbringing that reflects on who you are as a person today.
Sure. I did not have the fairy tale upbringing, and I didn't have just, a standard, let's say, dysfunctional family. I grew up in what I call the evil Brady Bunch. I don't know if the Brady Bunch made it out to Across the Pond, but it was a show in the 70s about two families that got together and formed a mixed family. You've got the one with all his boys and the other with all her girls, and they married, and you have a step parents. Well, I kind of had an evil stepfather that went ahead, and to this day, I actually thank him for being that way. He was a very rigid electrical engineer. And because of growing up around him, I learned the value really of self-discipline, but also believing in oneself, because if no one believes in you, that you really only have yourself to believe in, because sometimes you're your best rooting audience for your ideas, and you have to be that as an entrepreneur.
That's interesting about saying about your stepfather. Was he military? He sounded like with the self-discipline and all that.
Yeah, sure. Well, he was what I would call soft military. So he was, yes, he was a colonel in the Air Force. He didn't go ahead and do the whole military type of thing per se, but he was very rigid. He was in the Air Force for, I think, 26, 27 years. Wow. He was an officer, but he wasn't the standard military guy. He was kind of like one way with most people, and then another way once that door was closed. So it teaches you a lot about humanity.
Absolutely. And that believing in yourself, I think, is so important as an entrepreneur, especially when you start in maybe your first business or your first couple of businesses, and you've got to believe in yourself, or you're not going to be able to convince anyone else to either buy your product or service or invest in you or build a business with you. If the listeners that I've got out there that either haven't started a business or quite early on in developing a business, that self-belief, just put the value on having belief in what you can achieve and the potential that you have.
I believe that everybody has a little voice inside their head that literally is telling them what to do. And they may not listen to it as they get older and they go to school. A lot of times it's crapped upon them to not listen to that. They start having all these other voices in their head about the fear, the doubt, the why it couldn't be done, it shouldn't be done. They have their parents telling them, no, go the safe route. You shouldn't do that. It'll never work. Who are you to do that? Those types of things. But I really believe that little voice, you're fighting for your life. That little thing there is what enables you to become a fully fledged human being as an adult. And I think the worst place to be is on your deathbed and having the regret of never going after what that little voice tells you. So that little voice may not be the loudest voice. You know, that little voice, though, is really what it's all about. And having that, the ability to listen to it, to give it spark, to give it life, to cultivate it, to protect it. I think that's what you really need to do as an entrepreneur, but also as a human being. It's all about that.
I think it's David Goggins who said, do what others won't do or aren't able to do or don't want to do. If you do that, you're probably going to be successful.
I call it doing the shit, and I hope I can curse on this show because that's what I call it. In terms of Goggins, he's absolutely dead on. If you do the shit, the stuff that other people don't want to do, the stuff that's painful, and I say shit for a reason because it really is shit work. You do the stuff that people don't want to do, that there's nothing attractive about, that smells bad, that sucks, that's long hours, that's nothing big in terms of attractiveness or ease, that's the fertilizer that all the good stuff grows out of. And that's why fertilizer is shit. That's how you get the plants. That's how you get the fruits. That's how you get the vegetables. The same damn thing with life. If you lay down it in fertilizer, you will have great stuff come from it, but it ain't easy. It's not supposed to be easy. And it sure as hell ain't pretty or glamorous in any way, shape, or fashion.
It's so true. It's like it's other people. I think it's like Gary Vee is quite well known for saying that, like, you don't go out, you don't really socialize, you're not partying with your mates or doing all the fun things, but actually, and this is a really interesting topic because I worked in corporate for 14 years before I started my businesses, so I understood the professionalism of corporate, but I actually saw that it wasn't fulfilling me. It was not giving me value, the value that I wanted to get. And so if there's people listening out there that are, I don't know, maybe in their mid-20s, they've started a career or they've started a job that's led to a couple of jobs, but they really want to be an entrepreneur and they don't know what those steps to take. One person that actually gave me really good advice before I left my job was have an amount of savings which you're willing to go into when you're starting the business, because it always takes a little while to start moving.
Sure.
That's one thing that actually rang really true, because I would have probably been back in corporate if I didn't have had that support that I had already in savings. What for you is the critical pieces of the jigsaw if someone actually wants to take that step and become an entrepreneur?
This is going to sound simple, extremely simple, but it's really true. All right. So you went ahead and took certain steps. You listened to people. You had some savings before you took the leap, etc. All right. But what you're really not seeing is that just that act of saving in that job, that was taking a step. And so literally, if you simplify it down to taking that first step. Now, the fact of the matter is many people can't really save up. Most people are living from paycheck to paycheck, or they maybe have 2 weeks worth of savings that they're living off of. So saying that to most people, they can't do it. But they do typically have something there that they can't go ahead and monetize. And what is it? It's time. almost everybody on the face of the earth has some extra time, some excess capacity. So if you just utilize that time, whatever the hell it is, whatever you have, even if it's an hour, even if it's every Saturday, even if it's, a Friday night, whatever it may be, if you take the actions to start a business utilizing that time, eventually you'll get there. You just need to use the resources that you have at your disposal right now and get started.
And we're in a much better place with Google and having everything to our fingertips. You can learn most things for free. In most cases, there are things that you can start the process. Might not be able to perfect it without some sort of paid training, but you can definitely start it that way.
Yeah, but also think of it this way. You mentioned one aspect of it. So, and your assumption is, okay, you're going to learn about something and maybe possibly go down the road of mastering it. Now, that's one thing to do a skill. But if you're starting a business, I'd say that that's not necessarily the skill set to do. With the internet right now, you are literally one layer away from connecting to anyone. I mean, literally anyone out there. So as a founder, if anything, you should utilize that by expanding the circle, by expanding your network of contacts, by expanding your people that have those skill sets already, so you don't have to master them. As an entrepreneur, your job really is to bring those people together and have them solve your problem. It's not you going ahead and solving that problem and now trying to figure out how to sell it. It's by bringing in the expertise of others. That's absolutely the way that we look at it.
That's absolutely right. So what was your first business that you started?
My first business, I was 6 years old, and I sold what's called burpee seeds door to door. They were seeds for like watermelon, sunflowers, celery, creating your own garden. And I saw a little business opportunity ad in the back of a Spider-Man comic book. And I sent my $5 in, and I got, I think, 50 burpee seed packets. And you sell them for $1 a piece. I knocked on doors door to door at an Air Force base. And I grossed $50 off a $5 purchase. So I netted $45 looking back in hindsight, and I was kind of hooked from that second on. And so business had always been an appeal from an early age.
So what was the actual, I just want to delve a bit deeper because I'm interested to hear, whatever it was, 16 or 18, your first serious business that you actually built. What was that? Because you got 24 of them that you built. So what was that first one that actually gave you an income, or you were able to build to sell, or whatever you did with it?
Sure. Well, back in the day, they had something called audio text, which is pay-per-call numbers. Like you'd have these pay-per-call numbers, you'd advertise, and then you generate it. At the time, they had them for horoscopes. They had them for different services, different things, whatever it may be. And I remember to this day, it was a wrestling line. At the time, there wasn't the internet, so people didn't know what was involved with wrestling, and there was like a niche market, a very high group of zealots that wanted this information. And I walked around the boroughs of New York putting flyers on cars. I kid you not, like literally just putting flyers on cars, and literally the next month had 50 grand. And so that was the birth of a business that turned into what's called an audio text service bureau. We hubbed and provided the hardware and software for everybody else to get into that business. And then that took off like a rocket.
Amazing. And I've just written here, so that style of marketing, putting things on doors, putting things on cars, things like that. What do you think we've lost? Because we've obviously gained quite a lot from digital marketing.
Sure.
It's a great social media, for example, that it's an amazing portal, as well as sharing with friends and family, but being able to sell through digital marketing. What do you think the pros and cons are of traditional marketing? And I can give you an example of my area, but traditional marketing versus digital marketing. What do you think we've learned and lost with digital marketing?
I think in a way we've given up a huge asset that can actually accelerate the growth of a company. And that's what people don't realize. So let me explain what I mean by that. It's very easy to go ahead and buy some digital ads and do A/B testing and assume that, let's say, the A is better than the B, and you start working your way through it and everything else. Or you buy digital ads and it's something that's dead on arrival and doesn't give you anything back. Or usually it's in between. You start doing digital advertising, and then it's kind of like a small hook there that reels you in to spend more and more because you saw a little bit of good positive results, but it never really necessarily catches on. Well, when you do the basics, the basic block and tackling type of marketing, what involves people, human interaction, face to face in some way, what you end up doing is you end up literally seeing these micro messages, these micro flagging of what a person really believes, of how a person feels. And as a founder, interacting like right now, you're shaking your head. I know that you see, and now you're smiling. I can see that you're like agreeing, and you're starting to really see, the value of doing that, because what it allows a founder to do is to go ahead and shift their pitch, to test their pitch, to go ahead and do these different iterations on a micro scale very, very, very quickly. And so what that enables, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm getting goosebumps right there. What that enables you to do is to then start creating the stuff that's scalable. So I say you do that shit work, the standard marketing, the face-to-face stuff, the hard outbound sales, the cold calling. Why? It's not scalable, but it gives you the foundation for creating the marketing messages, the sales lingo, the authentic voice that enables you to scale.
So important. So I'll give you the example of real estate. So one of my businesses is in real estate, and I went and got educated by, it doesn't matter, but someone, the Grant Cardones of the UK world, let's say, who's very interested in real estate. And they were very much pushing me down do Facebook ads, post, connect with people there. And I spoke to a friend of mine who'd been doing it for 20 years, and I didn't really realize that was one of the things he did, and he said, right, yes, there is a place for Google ads, for Facebook ads in property, absolutely, but do you know what you should be doing? Going and networking, going to events, going to networking events, go and speaking to people, learning what they want. So one of the things I do is wholesaling. So I go out and I find property deals, real estate deals for my investors. Now, I could have collected some investors, one in Newcastle, one in Wales or whatever, and they could be valuable clients to me. But because I went into London and I went and networked for a long time, built up my network of people, I now know I can go and have a coffee with the guy to see if his preferences have changed, or things that he's looking for are more important than they otherwise are. If I'm just sending out an email with a list of deals that are possible, I've got no feedback. I've got no, yes, you're doing that well. No, you don't. I wouldn't do that. That doesn't work for me. This works better for me. And I really do believe that it's not just real estate. It's business in the whole totality. It's a people business. It's a business for people. You should be trying to create your solution for your clients that you actually know. It can be on Zoom. It doesn't have to be face-to-face, but that's the way you grow businesses.
Well, the vast majority of, and I'm gonna say this loosely here, but it's not meant as a slap against an industry. So the vast majority of venture capital backed tech companies, all right, the reason they fail is not because they didn't create this wonderful tech solution, okay, that they didn't go ahead and solve the main issues and everything else. The reason they fail is because, first and foremost, they didn't realize that they're not a tech company. They're a sales and marketing company. And what they didn't do is go ahead and position themselves for the human element from the very beginning. And if they position themselves directly in front of people, talking to people, interacting with them, seeing what they're doing, that fundamentally creates a different product than just going ahead and doing heat maps on your website to try to see what they're doing. You don't know the whys, you don't know what's thoughts behind it. And at the same time, though, again, that's not scalable, but it leads to the stuff that's a much higher revenue, much higher growth. That is the stuff, the foundation of building.
And it's really interesting you talk about tech industries, because my corporate career took me through working for corporates, selling software to other corporates. And one of the key components of it is user research, like UX, user experience. And what I did find was that we had some great, really, really intelligent people who had been in the industry a long time, and they talked about user experience, all based around my experience of working in this industry for 20 years is that you need to do A, B, and C. And one of the things I found frustrating about that was like, well, why don't we talk to our current clients and see if they want this additional feature, or would they find it valuable, or something like building up that personal attachment, association with people, rather than just saying like, these people were super intelligent and I've no doubt they had great insight, but you can't get any better insight if you're trying to cross sell to another client something else than actually go and speak to them.
But also think, I look at it this way, and I don't want to, I'm a child of the 80s, so please excuse my French when I say this. So you're in England. At one point in time, there was a thing called a 3 martini lunch. Now, many people would have said, oh, that was just, a time, and it was, extremes, and people shouldn't do that. But there's actually a reason why the 3 martini lunch existed on a different level. When you start having a couple drinks, well, the other person definitely loosens up, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens is they're more open to discussing their problems. And when they're discussing their problems, that's where the opportunity is. And I don't mean like their personal problems. I'm talking their business problems. Then you're able to see, okay, maybe there's some other products there. Maybe it's not just a feature that you've already created. Maybe it's something that you haven't ideated yet that is the real business that you should be going after. And that only comes from human interaction and human relationships.
Absolutely. To quote Simon Sinek, what's your why, Chris? Why do you do what you're doing?
I do it for a couple reasons. Number one, growing up in Dayton, Ohio, Fairborn, Ohio, in the middle of nowhere, I saw my mom from a young age who had brilliant ideas. She was working as a low-level secretary, government secretary, buyer secretary, and she could never get an idea off the ground ever until well into her 50s, at which point she did make it, and she did make it pretty big. But having to see her ideas, her potential just locked up and never living life fully in the way that she should have was, to me, just basically a tragedy, and no human being should do that at all, ever. Another thing, though, is about 4 or 5 years ago, I came across a group of entrepreneurs in Washington, D.C. at a venture capital meeting, and these entrepreneurs didn't look like everyone else. They didn't talk like everyone else. They didn't dress like everyone else. They didn't go to Stanford University and wear hoodies. They didn't live in New York or Silicon Valley or Israel, which accounts for 95% of all venture capital dollars. But they had brilliant ideas. I mean, really effing brilliant ideas. They just didn't know that their chances of getting funded was non-existent. Well, that's what led me to create what I created, because seeing that tapped up was just absolutely ridiculous. And I think the market should make the decision on whether or not somebody is able to start their business, not venture capitalists, and not the venture capital ecosystem, which doesn't exist in Ohio, that happened to my mom.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say about people in areas where venture capital is not so lucrative. A guy I had, I'm trying to desperately think of his name, was investing, I think it's iSelect is the company, and he was building funding for for less sexy than tech businesses. So he was looking at farming, manufacturing, and those businesses, and being able to, they're the bedrock. And it was like biohacking on farming and vertical farms and all these new things, which probably will be hugely beneficial for humanity, not just another app that no one really wants. And so, so I'm intrigued. Why did you say, I'm going to draw a line and I'm not going to move to California to go to Silicon Valley? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work with businesses that deserve funding because they've got great ideas. This is what Gasha does, has great ideas, and help those guys. Why did you counteract? Why did you butt against the historical VC?
I had somebody tell me, a very good, close associate of business to me, say the following. He said, this could never have been born in Silicon Valley, the idea for Gusher. And so I figured, where I am right now, yes, it's not Silicon Valley. It's not even New York. Philadelphia is kind of world of its own, where I'm based right now. And it's not the hotbed of startups or business activity or anything else. But I figured if you could do it here and you can get that type of company off the ground, then I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid. And it's something that it doesn't matter whether it's a grandma in South Africa or whether it's a person without a penny in London, England, or Dubuque, Iowa, or Eastern Europe. It doesn't matter. We had to drink the Kool-Aid and stay here. And that basically was a choice that we made as a team and I made as an individual.
Interesting. What's your view on labs and incubators?
That's a loaded question. Here's what I'm going to say to them. Something like, and I'm not going to give exact, well, something like 99% of them have a negative ROI. All right. So I agree with them that they'd be great, but they're not a market mechanism. It's another form of venture capital where they're passing judgment on ideas as individuals or as a small group of people versus the market mechanism. The market doesn't lie. The market doesn't bullshit. It definitely values things incorrectly at times. But if there's no market for it, it's not going to go ahead and give you success. And so I believe in a market mechanism, not an individual or not a group of people, small group of people.
So what business or businesses, give a couple of shout outs, are you really excited about now?
It's going to be self-promotion if I do that. All right. So number one is Gusher, obviously my main company. But also there's a company called Happy Howl, which is really reinventing dog food. They're growing like crazy. There's a company called Security in Motion on our platform. They're reinventing personal security in a mobile way. There's Pharmalogical, which has created a new type of functional drink based upon oats, which is really, really neat. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There's a ton of them.
So how many companies do you have working with you at Gusher then?
Sure. We have over 350 right now, and we're
Wow.
growing pretty damn quickly. So
Amazing.
It's a good amount across all different industries, all verticals, everything from B2B, B2C, B2B2C, and everything in between.
Amazing. What's your favorite part of business? Sales, marketing, operations, strategy? Or name another one? What's your favorite bit which gets you excited every day?
Sure. I think really seeing an idea, and it's not sales, it's not like a segment of vertical or anything like that. It's taking an idea and giving it life. It's giving it birth. It's the actual starting of it. I become really bored when a company hits, let's say, 50 million in sales and becomes incremental or something like that. But the physical starting, that actual creation, it's very difficult to templatize that start. It's like the fog of war. And I like that fog of war. I like that bouncing, that ideation, that creation, the putting together the DNA of literally how a company is going to roll out at first. That's interesting to me. It's damn interesting to me.
I couldn't agree more. It's the struggle is more fun than actually succeeding. It's like when I was doing well in corporate, once you get to a certain point, you kind of, it's like, okay, well, I've got there. Like, what now? And I hear that from business owners that I've interviewed is that it's a lot of fun starting and building the business. Once it grows too big and
Sure.
and you've implemented a whole team, a CEO, a CFO, a COO, etc., it's no longer your business anymore. It's growing on its own without really your impact. And lots of people that I've spoken to have sold businesses and said that I enjoy that starting point, that ideation, that working, doing a little bit of everything to make it work.
Of course.
And so to be able to scale a business, you have to systemize. You do have to have the right people in the right places. And I'm interested if any of your businesses got to IPO stage or whether those you left before they got to that stage. What's your experience with actually putting them on the stock market?
Sure. We never went IPO. We did sell a lot of companies to private equity. We have exited in terms of venture capital rounds. We've had companies sold to private companies, but we never went the public route. It was something that just never really interested me. And you got to understand, I started off on Wall Street when I was 17. All right. So I was a stockbroker with Oppenheimer, Smith Barney. When I was very young, I was the youngest stockbroker. And I'm not going to go too much into it, but what I saw there just turned me off to the public markets. And it was something that I vowed at that time I would never do.
So you've never been even contemplated growing a business that big?
Well, it's not growing a business that big. I mean, you can have very large companies that are not public oriented. I mean, UPS, United Postal Service, was never a publicly traded company. They were very much private, and there's been a lot of other examples of that. Typically, when you're going public, you're most times cashing out or giving extreme value to shareholders that have been part of your company a long time. So if you're not in alignment with your shareholder base, almost in a way, there's a necessity to going public. However, if you're in alignment with your shareholder base on what you're doing, I don't think that's necessarily par for the course. Also, I don't like the idea of having to go ahead and report every 30, 60, 90 days. And I don't like people going ahead and telling me what I can say publicly because I say extreme things publicly. So I'm not sure that I'd be the best public officer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So something that is become within men really more important than when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and the whole essence of mental health wasn't really a factor. And we've found in the 21st century that it's growing more and more important for everybody. It's something that, especially with men, we should be talking about more. So what's you don't have to tell me about personal experience, but what I was wondering was, what do you think mental health, what entrepreneurs should be thinking about when it comes to mental health?
Well, listen, I've never said this in a public forum, but I'd be happy to. So, when it comes to mental health, I had a scenario where I had clinical depression for about 12 months, and it was vicious. My wife is a psychologist, all right? And we weren't married at the time, but she convinced me and persuaded me at the time that, having that issue was kind of like having a broken arm. And if you have a broken arm, well, do you let the arm be broken, or do you go to the hospital and have them put a cast on it and make damn sure that the bones are set right so that you heal correctly? So in my case, there was a certain process that I followed for about a year and a half, and then I was basically fine and got through it. But I believe that mental health is of the utmost importance. I believe that, especially as a man. At the same time, I also believe a lot of that comes from many times, the physical interactions that you have and the lack of taking actions that are what you should be doing that results in it. But if it's a broken arm, you're going to go to the hospital. If you have a mental issue, you have to address it right off the bat, even though you don't want to, and even though you're in a dark place. And it can be a very dark place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's really good. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I think it's something that we should be talking about. And as you say, like in the UK, I can speak for that men are most likely to commit suicide. That's the biggest killer. And I think a lot of that has been because people were not willing to open up even to friends or family. I was born in 1980. I still struggle sometimes with that because I got brought up that you just get on with it. You just move forward and you just plow on. But I've spoken to a few people recently, and they've all said they've had darker times. And a very similar thing to what you said. If you had a broken arm, you would go and get it fixed. If your mind is broken's not a great way of describing it, but if something is wrong, you should go out and you should find the best people to be able to resolve those issues.
Absolutely. And it's not simple as saying, hey, we'll just have it go away. There's a big difference. If you have depression, it doesn't just go away. It's something that you have to take steps, and it may be incremental steps. It may be something that happens over time, but you must take action on it, or it can end up in a bad place pretty damn quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. What's the future? What's the next 2 to 5 years for Chris and his business?
Sure, nothing but Gusher. I mean, I'm totally focused on Gusher and getting that basically even further in terms of expansion. We're all across the globe right this second, but we're growing at about a 10x rate. So over the next year and a half, we should be bringing on about 3,500 companies. And as far as I'm concerned and ran the numbers, there's about 700 million people across the globe trying to figure out how to start a business at any time. And if the capital constraints are holding them back, they're not. And that's what we're there to address, and helping those people get their businesses created and launched.
And I don't want to know numbers or anything, but your fund that
Sure.
you do to support those businesses, is that private investors? How have you
Well,
created the fund?
Well, Gusher works differently. We don't have a venture capital fund, okay? So
Okay.
what we do is something called performance-based equity. So what I normally say to founders is, imagine you had 1 million or 2 million in the bank account right this second, all right? How would you build your company? What would you do? And then take those steps, Gusher that, because we do it all day, every day. What do I mean by that? People join your company in exchange for performance-based equity. And we deal with all different companies, all different types, all across the globes. As I said, we've launched more than 350 companies as of now, and we're growing rapidly. Everything from manufacturing, SaaS, fintech, AR, VR, AI, gaming, medical device, prop tech, you name it, we've got it. But also more importantly, we've got greater than an 80% success rate where these companies become self-sustaining and or attract larger scale capital. So it's a way of starting a business without needing investors, without needing investment capital.
So you're helping them with putting actual people in those positions to help them build their businesses. So if they're short on marketers, you would bring a marketing expert to come in and help them, for example.
Kind of, but what we do is put the whole team together. So we would say not just a marketing officer. If you're creating, let's say, a consumer goods company, here's one of our companies, you would need a chief marketing officer, creative director, social media manager, but also in that case, they need a formulator. They need a material scientist. They need packaging designer. They need a manufacturer for it. So what we do is all these people come together. They're in exchange for equity, for performance-based equity, and the founders still retain a good portion of it, about 80 to 90% of the equity, but it's a way for them to get that company from zero to market very, very rapidly with people that buy into the idea, into the concept.
Interesting. Very interesting. And we've talked a few times about the market and how it's honest. It might get it wrong, but it is honest and it reflects how good a business is. But why do we persist with an imperfect system, or i.e. the market? It is the best way of doing things, but why do we persist with trying to keep on track with what the market wants?
I don't know. I tend to think, and I'm an Austrian economist by training. So I guess in a way you could say I'm married to free market economics because that's what Austrian economics is. But really, I think it comes down to I fundamentally believe in the individual. All right. With Austrian economics, we believe that the power of everything lies in the hands of the individual, of the entrepreneur, versus just these vacuous groups of whatever. And it comes down to that entrepreneur taking the risk. And so, in free market economics, what ends up happening is you do have a lot of that risk borne by the entrepreneur who's taking that on. And so, and most times it works against them. Most times they pay a horrific price creating something and bringing something to market. So, I don't put my faith necessarily in the market. I do, but it's really in the actual individual entrepreneurs that I fundamentally believe in, because they're going to go ahead and create stuff that has value. And if they don't, then it's not going to work. And they're taking on the risk themselves primarily in those beginning stages. And that's a hellacious price and a hellacious position to be in, and to do it willingly. Well, they're my heroes. I mean, 100%. They are heroic individuals. And I don't care what they're starting, whether it's a copycat business, whether it's something that's more of just creating a lifestyle type of business. Going out there on your own, that's heroic in my book.
100% agree. Can a good entrepreneur make a bad business successful?
Here's the thing. I don't fundamentally think there are bad businesses. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to answer this a different way. A bad business, what I would consider a failure, is just a stepping stone. It's part of the process. So can a good entrepreneur take something that's as a stepping stone and be able to evolve that or convert it or take the next steps down that path? Maybe, maybe not. There's no definitive answer. Have I seen it done before? Yes. Have I done it? Yes. Usually does it involve a tremendous amount of pain? By pain, I mean a tremendous amount of change to current scenarios or whatever the play out is? Yes. Very rarely does a business pivot. And a pivot means, a slight angle and going into something else. I mean, they're more rare than unicorns. So can a good entrepreneur turn a bad business around? Hell yeah, they absolutely can. But it's not a bad business. It's just how it's evolving and where it is at that stage. That's what I view it as.
Amazing. All right. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. And they're a little bit thought provoking is how they've been described.
Okay.
First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
To get married to my wife.
Was that recent or is it?
No, that was 20 years ago. Yes.
20 years ago. Okay.
But I think that the person that you marry, you should choose wisely, because that is going to affect every last thing that you do for the rest of your life. So choose wisely. That is your most important business partner.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Here's the thing. I was never given advice. I never had mentors. I never had anything like that at all, ever, zero, nada.
Wow.
So I was never given like great advice by outside forces. However, there was one scenario that I was given it. It had to do with a non-business. And that person said, because I explained to him, hey, I was about to have a child, but I'm not a normal father. I don't go play games and go do baseball or go do sports. And he's like, Chris, just take your child and teach him where you go, teach him what you know. And to this day, all my kids go with me to business meetings, business trips. They all know how to go ahead and read people and find out whether an idea is valid or good or bad or whatever it may be. So I teach them what I know.
How many kids do you have?
3 boys. 3 boys.
3 boys. Amazing. Who helped you? Well, this has kind of been answered, but who helped you most in your career?
Most, I can make a cheesy answer like adversity helped me most. All right. When in fact, that's actually really true. If you want a person, it would probably be my wife. She stood with me through thick and thin. She stood with me at the top of the mountain. She's been with me when I was underneath the mountain and everything in between. But my wife was definitely probably the most important person.
And this isn't one of the questions, but as you didn't have coaches or mentors in your life, do you see the value for other people to have coaches or mentors?
I think having coaches and mentors is definitely an advantage. And let me tell you why. You're able to go ahead and leapfrog almost in a way generationally where you are by listening, simply listening. The resources that are out there today were never around when I was starting business or even continuing business. And I think they're invaluable. But you now have to go ahead and just really determine what is valuable for you or not, because there's so much information. So take what is of value to you and leave the rest behind.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, back to the questions. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I could say, oh God, I was going to make a bad one. I shouldn't have done that. A regret that I have. I was a mean SOB in my 20s. Let's put it that way. So I was not a nice founder, a nice CEO. I was very brutal. I treated people like cogs. Now my people are my most valuable assets and relationships, and they walk out the door every day. So the people component was definitely not there in the 20s.
Right, this is going to mean absolutely nothing to you, but hopefully some of my audience, and I'll try and explain it to you. So I'm a fan of cricket. So obviously I'm British, I'm English, we like cricket.
Sure.
And there was a cricket player called Kevin Peterson, and he was a South African that played for England, as there's always been through English cricket. Anyway, cut the long story short, he was the best in the world. He then was made captain, and he did an awful job, a terrible, he had no personal skills at all. And he said, he's reflected upon this and interviews and things like this, and he said, when I was made captain, I was the best in the world. I played all formats. I had no children. I'd had a girlfriend. I wasn't married. I didn't know why he thought he had the best job in the world. And when people were struggling and wanting to go home and see their families, he said he didn't care. He didn't care at all, because he was saying, this is the best job in the world. You should throw everything in towards that. Now he's got kids. Now he's left cricket. He's now a pundit, and he does other things as well. He said if he'd have known that when he was captain, he could have been a great captain, but he had no personal skills because he was too good and he didn't ever experience a problem. I think that's kind of what you said, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. At least in my youth, there was one goal, one focus, and it was always business, business, business. I had no personal life. I had no relationships. I didn't have kids. When I had kids, that's when it all shifted.
Yeah.
That's when the golden rule became extremely important and valuable. And I saw the value in it. And I was like, oh, Christ, here I was, a horrible human being for a couple decades. Yeah, I was.
What are you most proud of?
It's not business. All right. That's the thing. It never is. With me, I'm proud of who my children are turning into. Extremely proud. I couldn't be more proud. They're natural leaders. And I mean that in the real valuable sense. I mean, I have kids that they stand up for their friends on the bus when their friends are being attacked for horrible reasons. I have kids that do the right thing, even though, they've learned the hard way, basically, to do the right thing. So my legacy is my kids, not the businesses.
Okay. The next question is, what does legacy mean to you? You preempted it.
I think I just answered that. But, in terms of the children, in terms of everything else moving forward, family, I'd say it's 100% that. However, also having said that, there's a part of me that's the business side that says, I hope to go ahead and have Gusher there as a legacy business. But the businesses that have created as a result of Gusher, that ripple effect, that's going to be around for a very long time. So that's a legacy that I'm happy about.
Amazing. And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Sure. Just go to gusher.co, gusher.co. You can find me. You can pop on there. We'd be happy to help you in any way.
Perfect. Look, that's it, Chris. That's the end of our time. Thank you so much for the interview. It's been really fascinating hearing your story, and I'm sure people will be inspired by this story. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.